I can't hear anything what is going on there.
Huh?
No sound coming to me.
Now, is it coming? Is it coming, Amarjit ma'am, now? Is it coming now to you? Acha, I will call her. Okay, Purvi.
Hello? I can't hear anything
Now can you hear
from
me?
your IMPRI room.
Now can you hear? Okay, Purvi, you start. I'll give ma'am.
All right. Namaste and greetings. I, Purvi Narayan, researcher at IMPRI,
I
Impact and
can't hear
Policy Research
anything,
Institute.
whatever is
Prabha
being
Evam.
spoken in the studio.
I guess somebody can guide, ma'am. Can somebody please call her personally?
Probably
I'll
if
restart.
the connection is not okay, she can switch off the video and keep only the audio. Like I've done that.
Purvi, please continue. We'll connect with ma'am.
All right. All right. I'll start from the beginning. Okay. Namaste and greetings. I, Purvi Narayan, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi. Extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Talk. We are gathered today for a panel discussion on employment, livelihoods, and Union Budget 2025 to 26. As part of IMPRI's 6th annual series of the thematic deliberations and analysis of Union Budget 2025 to 26. This discussion is organized by the Center for Work and Welfare, CWW, IMPRI Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi, as a part of IMPRI Web Policy Talk series. I welcome all of you to this enlightening deliberation and thank you for tuning into this discussion. Now let me introduce the
Nothing
esteemed
is audible to us what you are speaking.
Shall I continue?
Yes, Purvi.
Yes. You can send a message to her asking her to switch off the video and try.
Okay, I will go. Okay, I will rejoin. Okay.
Now let me introduce the esteemed gathering. Our chair for the session is Professor Suchita Krishnaprasad, visiting professor IMPRI, former associate professor and head of the Department of Economics, Elphinstone College, Mumbai. We welcome you, ma'am. The distinguished panelists for the session are Mr. Sandeep Chachra, Executive Director, ActionAid Association India and ex-co-chair, World Urban Campaign, UN Habitat Advisor, IMPRI. Professor Sarthi Acharya, Professor Delhi, Chair, Institute for Human Development, New Delhi, former Director, Institute of Development Studies, IDS Jaipur. Professor S. Irudaya Rajan, Chair, International Institute for Migration and Development, India. Professor Swarna Sadasivam Veppa, independent researcher and teaching consultant, visiting professor, Madras School of Economics, visiting professor, IMPRI Impact and Policy Research Institute. Mr. Udit Mishra, writer for the Explain page, the Indian Express. Dr. Parth Pratim Sahu, Associate Professor, Center for Entrepreneurship, Development and Financial Inclusion, and Head IC, Head in Charge, Center for Good Governance and Policy Analysis, National Institute of Rural Development and Panchayati Raj, NIRD and PR. Ms. Amarjit Kaur, General Secretary, All India Trade Union Congress. We welcome everyone. We look forward to learning from our esteemed gathering. Now, without any further ado, let us start the program. To begin, we have a couple of brief budget presentations. I invite Ms. Malika to begin with hers, followed up by Ms. Sana. Team, over to you. Do we have Ms. Malika in the meet?
It's still not audible to me. What is wrong with your side?
While the past policies emphasize industrial growth and capital investment, this budget brings a renowned focus on job creation, skill development, and livelihood enhancement to ensure economic prosperity reaches every section of the society. For years, Policies like production link intensive scheme encourage industrial growth but were often criticized for favoring capital intensive sectors. This year, however, the government has taken a decisive step by boosting labor intensive industries such as textile, leather and rural enterprises, which generate higher employment per unit of GDP. Recognizing the importance of agriculture sector in employment generation, the budget introduces Prime Minister Dhan Dhyan Krishi Yojana. This scheme, launched in partnership with
Dialogue
states,
और
aimed
नहीं.
to uplift 100 agriculture
आप
districts
डायलॉग तो
with
कुछ नहीं है,
productivity,
माइक के
benefiting
जस्ट बगल में
1.7
कुछ नहीं
crore
है,
farmers.
स्टॉप वीडियो है,
Additionally, the government
म्यूट
has
है
committed to Atmanirbharta in
और कुछ
pulses
नहीं.
through a 6-year mission focused on pulses like tur, urad, and masoor, ensuring
हाँ,
better
एक
income
एरो
for
है,
farmers and reducing dependence
उसको
on
मैंने ऑन
imports.
किया.
A major
सिलेक्टेड
boost for
माइक्रोफोन
rural
तो कौन
livelihood
सा करूँ?
comes from
सिलेक्टेड स्पीकर,
DAY and
सिलेक्टेड
RLM
माइक्रोफोन.
scheme, which seems its allocation increased to 19,000 crore from 50,047 crore last year. This will help to create
नहीं, उसमें तो
self-employment
है ही
opportunities for
सिलेक्ट द
millions in
स्पीकर
rural India. Further, to
और
support artisans
स्पीकर
and craft people, the
ऑडियो.
PM Vishwakarma Yojana will
अब
help
आप
over
बोलिए, कोई
61
बोलेगा
lakh
तो पता लग
artisans,
जाएगा
including
मुझे भी
women
सुन
from
रहा है कि
those
नहीं. कुछ नहीं
SC,
सुन रहा.
ST, and OBC
वो
communities
तो
to
कह रहे हैं
engage
मीटिंग स्ट्रीमिंग लाइव.
self-employment through
आई कांट
financial
हियर.
and skill development.
My participation itself will be a
Upgradation of
problem.
industrial training institutes with the increased allocation of 3,000 crore from 2,094 crore in FY25, the establishment of 5 national centers for excellence and skilling, which will partner with global institutes to equip youth with skills for both Indian and global markets. Customized credit cards for micro enterprises, providing 5 lakh credit limits to small businesses registered on the Udyan portal. A new scheme for the first time entrepreneurs, providing 2 crore term loans for 5 lakh new businesses over the next 5 years with the focus on women, SC, ST, and OBC entrepreneurs. Recognizing tourism as a key driver of employment, the government has introduced Mudra loans for homestays, enabling small entrepreneurs to boost tourism in their region. The top 50 tourist destination will be developed in partnership with state with performance-linked internship incentives to encourage tourism infrastructure, and easier e-processing to attract foreign tourists which generate more jobs in hospitality and transport. No personal income tax payable up to 12 lakhs under this new tax regime. This move is expected to increase household spending and ultimately driving demand and creating more employment opportunities. Lastly, coming to the scheme-wise allocation, so we can see that MD Narega has the highest allocation in 2025-26 at rupees 86,000 crore. This amount is same in the revised estimates for 2024 and 25. The allocation of the PM Kisan is at rupees 63,500 is also unchanged. So together the rural and urban Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana have allocation of 78,126 crore in 25 and 26 with an increase of 64% over the estimate or revised estimate of 2024 and 25. So in 2024 and 25 the expenditure for the scheme is expected to be lower by 44% as compared to the budget estimate. With this uh, with these initiatives, we aim to move towards a future where jobs are abundant, livelihood are secure, and our workforce is empowered with the skill necessary to make India a global economic leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Team IMPRI. Proceeding further, it is my honor and privilege to invite Professor Suchita Krishnaprasad to start the program with the chair's opening remarks. Ma'am, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Purvi. And am I audible?
Yes.
You are. I'm able to hear.
Okay, so this brief but very detailed presentation right now makes my job easy. And we have a battery of experts and very experienced people here. So I'll not take much time, but let me just point out that the big budget speech this year began with a list of dreams, such as zero poverty, 100% good quality school education, access to high quality, affordable, and comprehensive health care, 100% skilled labor, with meaningful employment. 70% women in economic activities. I think that refers to the female labor force participation, perhaps. And the farmers of our country becoming the food baskets of the world. So these are lofty ideals, and this was all it's supposed to be in support of 4 quadrants: Garib, Yuva, Annadata, and Nari. And so these are the groups whose livelihoods matter to the policymakers, so it seems. And, the budget mentions 3 engines, namely agriculture, MSME, and investment. Though I don't think investment is a separate section, a separate sector, but I must continue to just repeat what is there in the budget. Whereas agriculture and MSME are certainly sectors, investment will not be a sector unless you say financial sector or something. But anyway, it doesn't matter. So these 3 engines have been identified to push the economy towards a higher growth rate and hopefully help us to move out of the middle income trap, which India may find herself trapped in too, according to many economists, observers, as well as international organizations. The global scenario right now is certainly not most suitable to achieve the above goals. Wars have depleted much energy and resources and have also contributed to stirring the climate wrath further. And amidst this turmoil, there are announcements of higher tariffs in a hasty effort to re energize pale economies. The economic survey also, of course, mentions these uncertainties and which surround the entire global economy right now. And as the clouds of trade war begin to gather, there will be more challenges on the way, and many of them will be beyond the scope of an annual budget. But it would be useful to investigate how this budget, announced after the 3rd consecutive victory of the current ruling party, looks at the areas that affect the livelihood of the largest number of people in a country on the planet. And to do this, we have a team of experts with rich expertise in various fields like academics, journalism, and activism. So, with those brief remarks, may I request Professor Satyacharya uh, to bring out the overall job creation potential of this budget. So, Professor Satyacharya.
Thank you. I hope I am visible and audible.
Very much, sir.
Okay, so I have a PowerPoint presentation okay.
WFT में तो ऐसे ही PDF जाना है ना?
See that again?
Yeah, in the meantime, I request that we have 8 minutes per person. So let's stick to that thing, and
Yeah.
as much as possible, we go back to the budget. Yeah, that's right.
Next one, please.
Continue, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. So we start with, let's say, key features of the budget which have implications on employment and livelihoods. The first one is district targeting in agriculture for 100 districts. Pulses are important there. And it's also overall high-yielding variety seeds, improved variety seeds, vegetables and fruits, fish, the increased amounts under the Kisan Credit, etc. So these are the key things. Now, if you start agriculture, frankly speaking, we wrote something on agriculture in 2021. When you start with agriculture, begin these programs, it takes up to 5 years to have a transition. It takes up to 5 years to have a transition. So if we start targeting districts, we have to get the administrative system in place. We've got to address the farmers, which takes its own time. It takes farmers to switch from, let's say, non-pulse crops to pulse crops, which itself is a process because the land is not ready for it. It has to be made ready. It takes up to 2 years with my experience with agricultural scientists. Research and development yields results from anywhere 2 years to 5 years. So what I'm wanting to put across is that this is a good venture, but it is a long-term venture. And in this context, I need to say that a budget is really a part of a fiscal policy statement for that particular year. It's not a panacea for everything. It needs to be complemented with a monetary policy, with a long-term policy on, let's say, industries, long-term policy on energy, a long-term policy on research and development, etc., etc. So if one is wanting to, let's say, believe that a budget like in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s is going to be an answer to all questions, it's not. It's an annual split of a long-term vision on the fiscal components only. For example, if you take the monetary policy right now, the interest rates are too high. So in point number 2, for instance, point number 2 and 3, SMEs, industry, they can't borrow at this rate. It's too high. So the monetary policy has to come in line with the fiscal policy for these to fructify. Now, let me come to the industrial sector. Can we create jobs in electronics? The answer is yes, we can, but it's going to be in basically assembling, because we don't have capacity. Or there's too much of the noise. The backward linkages are just not there. They will be imported from overseas. Leather, the same thing, that yes, we have leather capacities, but they are all in the small scale and tiny scale sector. While if you look at some of the companies in Italy or China, they've got leather factories which employ 4,000 or 5,000 people, and they've got brand marks all over the United States and Europe. We have none. So we need to develop these capacities, which will take up to 3-4 years again. For the same thing I can say for toys and for garments, that in garments also, I mean, despite our emphasis on garments for quite some time, we still have this sector in the tiny and small scale. We don't have large scale garment factories like, for instance, in Bangladesh or Cambodia, where they have these factories where 4,000 to 5,000 workers are working at a time and provide a critical minimum size for companies which market these products in Europe, like Gap, for example. They would not order from small scale industries. They would order in bulk and give a size, give a certain style, and they would make it. So we need to open up this sector for the large scale and employ modern technologies, which again is a long-term proposition. On exports, what are we exporting is an important question. You look at the breakdown of the export, a great deal of it is raw materials. If you make it simpler to export through less bureaucratic means and lower taxes, what does it mean? It really means that we will export more of these raw materials. And for finished products, again, I go back to industries, that unless those industries develop and start competing, which means 3 to 5 years again, immediately there's hardly going to be any impact on human employment. Now, on human capital, I think a great deal needs to be told. We're talking about AI, which is very important. We talk about increasing seats in IITs, which is very important. Medical seats, yes, it's extremely important. Now, the key thing is our school system also geared to getting people into AI, IITs, and such things? The answer clearly is no, because if you look at most of the Zilla Parishad schools and municipal schools, latest reports show that class 5 students are hardly able to read class 3 texts. Now, with that kind of a standard, this is Zilla Parishad and municipal schools, and only this is only 22% of the students are able to do that. Now, if that kind of a standard is there from the feeder cadre, which is the school, the IITs are again going to create who? They're going to create elites who will probably, half of them will go abroad and provide human capital to international companies.
कहाँ से
The AI is the same thing.
इस पे करती हूँ.
Excuse me, can I have a little more silence, please? AI is again the same thing. A few years back, I distinctly remember we were talking about superconductivity. Somebody did it in United States. So we said we're going to do superconductivity. A few years back again, somebody said we must do electronics. We set up a factory here in Mohali. It shut down and nothing happened. And now this government 20 years later is saying, yeah, we must do something about it. Why are we being so ad hoc? China has developed DeepSeek, so we start saying we must have AI. Now, this ad hoc thing has to stop, and we need to have a long-term proposition in regard to our human capital and science policy. For instance, let's look at China, Korea, etc. They have long-term policies. It's product development, not aping. not copying others. They have developed it, so we must develop it. No, that's not the thing. I recently heard Venkataraman in Mysore, and he's a Nobel Prize winner from Oxford University. What he said is Indian research is good, but Indian research is never original. If somebody else has done something elsewhere, we will have an incremental component to it. So this has to stop. Go to Korea, they will say, okay, we must develop televisions for the world and work backwards towards flat screens, towards ICs, towards the works. And today, if you have a look, none of our televisions are other than LG, Samsung, or some Chinese products like Huawei, etc. We don't have Indian companies anymore. So it's important that we look at our human capital far more seriously. Finally, we talk about nuclear energy. Now, this nuclear energy is something which will take up to 10 years. They themselves have said it, not created. And a typical nuclear plant will have a few thousand people employed over 10 years. So as far as this budget is concerned, I personally feel that in the short term, only the apprentice scheme and the Trump portal for gig workers is going to be meaningful. The others are long-term propositions, and as a fiscal policy, it's going to aid that. Next, please. Next slide, please. Now, if you have a look at this casual laborers, you can clearly see these are very flat, and these don't change from one year to another. Next, please. Next. If you look at this, this is very important. People start saying that the labor force participation has increased, but where has it increased? Look at the female labor participation. So many of them are in helper and household enterprise, which means basically working within homes. Low productivity, unpaid jobs. Now, if you look at it in rural areas, it's 42%. Overall, is 36%. Women are working in. So if you have a long-term trend, which I showed in the previous graph, the long-term trend has increased primarily because these numbers have increased. Nothing else has changed. So these things clearly support what I had said earlier, that we are talking about a long-term change. We're not talking about an annual change which is going to start taking shape tomorrow. Next, please. Next slide, please. Now, if you look at this again, 45% of the 46% of the people are still working in agriculture, which has increased from 42% in the 2017-18 survey, which means that the modern sectors which are developing are no more absorbing labor. They are, in some sectors, are rejecting labor. Some are replacing labor by lower skill labor by high skill labor, and in general, it's the agriculture sector which is really the backbone of providing jobs, despite the low contribution to the GDP up to something like 16-17%. Next, please. Now, this shows the earnings. Now, other than the wages of casual laborers, which have shown slight increase, that's probably because of Narega. Wages of real wages of regular employees has decreased a bit, and so has the earnings of self-employed. These are not my numbers. These are from the economic survey, which was brought out day before yesterday. Next, please. Next. Yeah. So the key concerns are that if this budget is to succeed, the states have to come on board. We can't have a situation where the states do something else and the center does something else. Can we have some kind of a basic understanding between the states and the center, say on human capital, that a minimum of 6% will be spent on education in every state, as per the Kothari Commission and later commissions, and as per the 2020 new human capital policy? On inflation, now my thing is that inflation may be under control, as the government says, but it's a very, very strong cost push inflation. And it's cost push because a very large number of our products are having inputs, including medicines, from China and Korea and such kinds of places, which means that if the dollar goes down, which it has, this year itself, it's gone down 3%. So 3% inflation will automatically show up extra in addition to what happens locally. So we need to be very careful about what we are seeing in regard to import-export policy, because inflation is going to hit people badly. Next is the pay commission. The government had in 2014-15 categorically declared there's going to be no pay commission anymore, and we will see when to increase the wages. But suddenly they just declare a pay commission, which means several thousand crores of rupees will go to the babus and the clerks, etc., which means a large volume of resources will go to feeding this class of people rather than towards development process. Now, the fifth I have already talked about. Fourth I have already talked about, that we need to have an integrated policy of monetary policy, fiscal policy, industrial policy, etc. Now, freebies is something which every government is doing. Unfortunately, this is a huge waste of resources. And I heard an interview which says freebies have a negative employment elasticity. And freebies, the more freebies you give, the more problems you're going to have. And in research and development, I've already talked about, unless we have a targeted policy of product development, which will be a world-class kind of a thing, things are not going to happen. Thank you. I think I'll stop at that.
Yeah. So thank you very much for a very substantial, comprehensive, detailed account of where the economy is, what's happening to the livelihoods right now, and how the budget, unless and until the budgetary policy is, brings out a good interface and weaving between various other policies that might affect the livelihood, not much is going to be, is likely to be achieved. And of course, you also spoke about the time horizon which goes beyond the 1 year time which the budget is. Basically, previously, I think most of the budgets after the COVID have already this dream of what will happen in the next 20 years and 25 years and things like that. So since we have given up the 5-year plans, probably budgets are going somewhere in between. And in some pockets, we feel it's not an annual budget anymore. Thank you very much for that detailed description, and what a strong opening batsman we have. So with that, can we go to Professor Rajan, and if we can have some view on the internal migration, while all this turmoil take place, internal migration as a livelihood option, and two kinds of migration that one observes. One is a distress migration and the other is a aspirational migration. So migration, of course, is key to economic growth because that helps appropriate resource allocation for fuller utilization. We need people to go out of agriculture to more productive employments and so on. So Professor Rajan, what does this budget, in your opinion, give? What kind of attention and focus and accommodation this budget makes for various issues regarding migration? Professor Rajan, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Suchita. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes.
I thought I will devote a few minutes to discuss revisiting migration as a livelihood strategy for the India's rural poor. That's what I would like to spend my time on that. And most of us know that COVID-19 led to millions of urban migrants. In particular, those who lived in the smart cities. Of course, we call them smart cities, but during COVID, they were the dying cities anyway. But then we call them smart cities. And like Chennai is floating city. These are the cities we talk about today. And these cities, people were leaving to go back to rural areas. What we call in demography called reverse migration. They are going from urban back to rural areas. Did we provide enough opportunities for them in rural areas to keep them there, or they were returned back to cities? I think this is very, very important for us to think after the post-COVID era. Some of them still there in the rural, or they are all moved back to cities. I think what did we invest in those periods on agriculture and allied activities by the both state and central government? I think that is something very, very important. But the economic survey clearly says agriculture growth is below 4%. So agriculture is not growing. And then if you look at the allied activities like livestock, fishery, milk and meat, and yet it is growing little bit above 6%. That means agriculture is not growing, but the allied sectors like fishery and other sectors are growing a little bit higher. That is in the rural areas and the coastal belt. We look at the cities where they are coming back again because they are not able to hold with the NREG wages and the 100 days of work or even more days of work, which is not really taken very seriously by the last few years on the rural employment. They are coming back. If you look at it, service sector growth has declined in the urban areas. So other side, agriculture is below 4%. Service sector supposed to be accommodating lot of informal worker that is on the decline. And the economic survey says manufacturing sector, there is some growth, but there are major challenges. That means all sector which can provide employment, agriculture, industry and service, they are not in a good shape. All of them are in bad shape. If that is the situation we are today talking, there is a huge circular migration moving between rural to urban, urban to rural. You know, it's like they are not there. They are just moving. Not seasonal, I would say. I would call circular migrant because they are spending 3 months in rural. They come to cities and probably they are working for lower wages. Lower wages. I think, you know, we are talking about income tax rebate at this time, but do you have enough income to pay tax? Because income tax is fine, but are you able to earn income to pay tax? I think this is something we should look at it. Are we providing for rural people enough income, which is not currently happening? And added to that, there is a climate change and vulnerability. Are our agricultural people are ready to have resilient, climate resilient agriculture? I was looking at Orissa. We are doing a study recently on climate change and migration, which clearly indicate people are leaving even the coastal belt. What we should do at this stage, we should not talk about people pushing back from rural to urban. And we should aim at not the distress migration we are talking about. In fact, Orissa government set up a committee to study distress migration. How can we reduce distress? But we should talk about aspirational migrants. How many of them coming from rural to urban as an aspirational migrant, earning more income, sending more money back, children are going to school, no poverty, good education for their both sons and daughter. Are we doing that? I think climate change is going to affect much. And there was a chapter on climate change. But the unemployment figures looks very low. But I think that people are employed, but employed on very low wages. Are they earning enough to live? We call them not the minimum wages. We call in international level living wages. Living wages, because minimum wage is something. You say 100 rupees. In the city, 100 rupees you can't live. So you have to talk from minimum wages to living wages, which we discuss in the international migration arena. And finally, I was looking at it. India has a huge demographic dividend. Already everybody discussed about that. Probably India is the one country which we can talk about distributing migrant to whole world. We have surplus which can be distributed to the whole world. But are we providing enough skills? And the chapter on skills clearly indicate we are not ready. Demographic dividend is actually we are not able to utilize properly because of the low skills, though we have the Ministry of Skills. They are talking about skill, additional skills, reskilling. But I see, as looking at the student migrants who goes to Canada and Australia and UK, I have seen them, they are being de-skilled. Forget about skilling. You skill them in India, and our Prime Minister want to make India as a skill capital. But our students who goes with higher degrees, they are being de-skilled in some countries. Now we are talking about even undocumented Indians in Donald Trump's regime now. They're already listing a lot of Indians are being overstaying. I think time for us to talk more on international migration. If you are able to provide required skills. There is a demand supply. There are supply gaps. Every country wants to have some plumbers, some nurses, some doctors, some engineer, STEM. But are we producing the right kind of skills in India? Can we give them the proper skills? But the economic survey devoted a page for that. They have devoted one page on the international mobility. International mobility is going to be another important area they should concentrate, both internal and international migration. For that, they have to start talking about working on policies. We have no migration policy. There was a policy talked about during COVID-19, migration policy. But now nothing being talked about. Immigration bill being talked about for now 2-3 years. So I think the time has come based on the economic survey. We should talk seriously on migration policies to promote both internal and international migration, and not some of the states talking about don't come to our states, reserving jobs for the local. I think this should be debated so that we all have a decent jobs and decent livelihood in the coming days. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for that focus on rural areas and migration. I would like to know from you later when we come to this round that if the allied sectors seem to have done better in the recent past, to what extent do you attribute to that to the budgetary efforts? So, because eventually we want to, of course, we are all experts in our own fields, but we want to even again bring the focus back to the budget. So of course, one annual budget cannot achieve it all. But if there has been a consistent effort in one direction, say agro-based industries or allied industries, over the budgets in the past and even in now, we have some efforts on pulses being done right now and Makhana board and so on. So how do you think it would affect? So let's keep it for the discussion. Thank you very much. And can we have Mr. Sandeep Chachra, who would enlighten us on employment, wages and consumption in rural and urban sectors? Now that we have spoken a bit on rural areas and people, migration and so on. So rural and urban sectors, how does employment, wage and consumption move, and what this budget plans to do with it to improve the livelihoods of people? So, Mr. Sandeep Chachra.
Thank you, Dr. Krishnaprasad. Always an honor to be with you, and my greetings to all panelists. I follow what has been said. There may be slight departure points, but that's all. I follow largely the trajectory of discussions what Professor Rajan was talking about. I was expecting, since you talked about budget, but I'll go back to economic survey, which I think is more crucial in terms of reflecting the state of the nation today, despite the sugarcoating it has attempted to do. But having said that, I was expecting a populist budget, and a populist budget not in the sense of middle class populism. But populism is a historical necessity given where we are. But I was looking more from the perspective of a budget for the working classes of India. So that's where I want to sort of contextualize my interventions. And I know Ms. Amarjit Kaur will talk about it. Very seldom in the budget discussions, anywhere here or elsewhere, we have interpretation of the budget from the working classes of India. And I think a point was already made by Professor Rajan and earlier that we don't have pure peasantry and pure workforce. And what we have is peasant worker, and what we have is working people in pluri-works. So that's the kind of context. Now, if in this context, if we want to go back to look at the reality, the periodic labor force data, survey data is the most crucial to my opinion, which is where the sugarcoating has been attempted to be done by the economic survey. Now, already a slide was shown. If you want to see where people are, where majorities are, one needs to look at the employment data and the real wage data. So nominal wages may have increased, but across the board, except for daily wages, the real wages have shrunk considerably. That slide was already shown. I mean, I can repeat the figures, but look at some of the stark figures. In self-employment, the real wages of women were 4,348 rupees in the year 2017-18. And now it has shrunk by almost 20% plus to actually be at 2,950 rupees per month. So I'm taking an extreme figure. But this is also the figure, this is in self-employed category, and men's wages have also shrunk. But this is also the similar trajectory in regular employment and salaried employment. Of course, shrunk in both. The only exception being the wages in daily wage. Now, daily wage excludes public sector or what is called government programs, the public programs, not public sector, but the public programs. But they have marginally increased. The real wages have increased, but they remain still at precarious levels. The real wages for women per day is 159 rupees per day. So in terms of what she can do, and for men it's about 242. So you're somebody who's talking about decent wages, it's a far cry. So in a situation we have this. Now, if you look at wage differentials between men and women, the wage differentials have also increased over this period. We're talking of a 7-8 year period, right? So in terms of how much the women's wages have shrunk and how much the men's wages, real wages have shrunk. So I think that difference has grown. When we are talking of removing gender disparities or equal wages, that remains a total pipe dream. So for the women workers of India, this is the true situation. Now, what is happening in terms of sectors of employment? This has already been spoken to, just to sort of highlight a few things. We talk of female labor force participation increases. We welcome those. 23%, 23.3% in 2017-18, starkly up to 41+% now. And we have a target, as somebody was saying, up to 70%. But at what levels and under what conditions you can purely see. But also, Dr. Krishnaprasad, to explain to you that this increase in female labor force participation seems to be coming on two or three major trajectories. First, you find refuge in agriculture. Agriculture isn't growing, we just heard. So obviously at that levels of precarity, you find refuge there. Secondly, the unpaid category, unpaid worker category, unpaid work category has been counted. There's a micro survey done in 4 states, a few districts of 4 states in November of 2024 by the government of India, which tells us that yes, women may have benefited from some of the schemes of self-enterprise, which are being talked of in the scheme sections. One can sort of look at it, the credit programs and so on and so forth. But a large chunk of it probably has come from better counting unpaid work under extremely precarious conditions of work. So yes, we should celebrate increase in workforce participation, but one needs to do it cautiously and carefully, under what circumstances, under what precarities, and under what compulsions. Because it's not as if the men's wages have increased. So one is forced to do work at extreme high levels of precarity. So the data on consumption, I mean, we have talked of savings elsewhere. So domestic savings are at a historic low, at a 40-year low. So people have used their savings, and this, of course, goes to more those who can save. But if you look at consumption data, there has been a year-on-year somewhat growth in the consumption data. Yeah, small. But at the levels of consumption that there are, 4,000 rupees in rural areas, 6,000 rupees in urban areas, one cannot really celebrate consumption as a panacea that celebrate that data significantly. Now, I also want to sort of come back to the promise of the government to say that they would be, and I mean, economic survey last year said that we'll need to create roughly 80 lakh jobs per year, 78.5 lakh jobs per year, going up to 2030, year on year. It is not happening, and that data on employment, Professor Indira Rajan spoke to. That data on employment, the fall in sort of unemployment figures, marginal, but there is largely on account of people having had to take up work under extreme precarities, the working people of India. The headline of this budget was the middle classes. I think that's the only thing that this budget offered largely. Capex has been decreased. The other mantra government has been giving was that Capex will create employment. Capex will create infrastructure. Capex investments will create capital investments, or capital expenditures will create employment, and there will be a good ripple effect, buoyant effect on employment, on consumption, on demand, and so on and so forth. Allocation of capex last year, 11.1 lakh crores, 11 lakh crores, celebrated, highly touted as a panacea, wasn't spent in the last 9 months. There are several reasons down what states did, what sectors the capex was spent on, what sectors the capex did not take off at all, and whole range of implementation challenges. This year, the capex allocation has also been reduced by 1 lakh crores. The same amount of money which may be given as a relief, tax relief, 1 lakh crores. Now, a lot is being spoken about the tax relief given to the middle and the lower middle classes. There are two things there. One, it comes with a scant assumption that all of this money out in the market by the way of relief, tax relief, will be consumed. It would not be. First of all, it will go back to pay debts. Given the fall in domestic savings, it will go back to pay some of the the retreating public sector bills, health, education, the privatization of health, the privatization of education, the out-of-pocket expenses. So I think there's a huge assumption there. But even if we say that it is going into consumption, and that will have a ripple effect in creating demand, and that will have a ripple effect in creating employment in the long run, this seems too limited and too small for a $3.5 trillion economy. It's just too small. And the other thing is, who benefits from this relief? You can do the numbers of taxpayers. That mathematics is out there in the public domain. But a maximum 3 to 4 crore people in a population size of 120 crore people would have some benefit of some money. Let's say 15 crore people, the family numbers included, would have some partial benefit. Is this what we wanted by the way of creating a national sentiment, given the kind of challenges that we all face? Now, let me also talk quickly of manufacturing sector. I think we've all been saying that what is needed, and the illustration of nuclear, apart from its risk and apart from the other challenges and other trajectories which we don't welcome, the employment potential in nuclear is limited. The employment potential in some of the other schemes, the other one being the National Mission for Natural Farming, this other Krishi Dhanya Yojana, which was introduced in the beginning of this discussion. I think those are welcome. But having said so, the question of in the question of how manufacturing is being treated, I mean, one would have wanted to propose huge investments into rural, labor-intensive industrialization in a cooperative, collective manner. One would have wanted to see a huge allocation to the FPO cooperative sector, because that's where sustainable solidarity, livelihoods, and economics could have come about, labor protections could have come about. One hasn't seen those increases in the allocations. I will not get into the figures, it will take a long time, but allocations haven't increased under the Ministry of Cooperatives, for the FPOs, for the cooperatives, the whole range of possibilities. You can learn from what's happening in some of the states, expanding cooperative activity into waste management, into cleaning of cities, and the whole range of into technology, into service sectors, into gig economy. So beyond the welcome admission that gig workers need protection, and therefore the Ayushman Bharat scheme allocations go up this year, and that's welcome. There are substantive social security sort of outflows. Imagination and outflows remain missing. 4 years down the line, the labor sector reforms, the 4 labor codes yet to meet the ground, are yet to meet the workers in any benefits. We may critique the labor codes, which are further, flexibilizing the rights of labor and further submitting them to watering down. But having done, even if we do so, and even if we say, at least let's offer social protection, it hasn't gone up. It remains the same 5 national schemes, with, if you look at allocations, with marginally enhanced or static allocations. I took the example of Ayushman Bharat scheme, but the others remain at a static allocation. The social sector as a whole, allocations remain extremely low. MGA and RGA has continued to stay static. And I don't think the government is really listening or thinking of direct employment creation methods. It has not been expanded. It continues to be the same. Argument is, and we know data is, it'll go to pay back wages. A lot of it is back wages. It doesn't meet expansion into urban areas. So I think we need to sort of look at the current budget in that context, what needs to be done. And in my opinion, this budget fails to address the kind of expectations, social expectations there were, the kind of compulsions that there are in a dream for Viksit Bharat. Of course, we all argue that year-on-year budgeting cannot be a panacea, and it's just one small blip in a long direction. But I want to say that the direction, the deductions of direction given from this budget does not give me much hope in terms of making stable and secure progress towards welfare for all, towards inclusion for all, towards dignified livelihoods. I go back to the 3 promises you make to the women of India, to the workers of India, to the skill sets of India. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Yeah. So thank you very much for a very broad canvas, starting from the shift in the capex policy that we had ever since the pandemic. I mean, when the rest of the world was thinking of, advising our governments to deliver helicopter money, we were only insisting on credit, and we were tightening our belts. And it's now that before elections, we start giving a little bit of helicopter money under various schemes in different states. Yeah, of course, inflation has taken the toll of especially poor and the lower middle class. And the Reuters, in fact, it's not just about tomato, potato, and onion, inflation, but which affects very poor classes. But Reuters has come up with a research which shows that across the sectors, from engineering to logistics and to IT and various other sectors, which you would not call them as sunset industries, even there, the wages have risen, or the incomes of people have increased, employees have increased at a much slower rate than inflation. And therefore, there is a fall in real wages across sectors.
Absolutely.
And
See, corporate
of course, inequalities. Yeah.
Corporate profits have gone up 23.3%.
Yes, profits have gone up.
And look at real wages there. So, I mean, you know where accumulation is.
Right, right. So, and of course, sometimes I also muse whether, accumulation is another word for agglomeration, the platforms and so on. So they are aggregators, right? So can we replace aggregators as accumulators? So with that thought, can we go on to Amarjit Kaur, madam, who can come and enlighten us with all her experience in activism about the challenges that are facing the working class, and does the budget address any of these problems? Amarjit Kaur, madam.
Thank you, Suchitra ji. I hope I am audible.
Yes, you are.
Yes. I missed the first speaker, and later on I was struggling to join, so there was an issue of my listening. So I missed certain points, but I could listen to other speakers, including the last one, Sandeep. You see, she made a big statement. A country is not just its soil, a country is its people. And I think the people are left out in this budget, number one. Second thing which I want to say is that this budget aimed at elections. It's not a budget to revive India's economy, which is in very, very bad situation, bad shape. And day by day, our economy is further dooming. Decent jobs are not available, and agrarian sector crisis is not being met. The social sector is being ignored, and the working class, which speaks for the working masses, is supposed to be strangulated through this forcible labor code implementation without taking trade unions into consideration. So I want to be very blunt. I'm sorry for that. But the elections in Delhi and the elections which are forthcoming in Bihar were in the focus as far as this budget is concerned. How they try to camouflage as if this middle class is going to gain in a big way, and that's going to give boost to the whole economy. How many are going to gain? Not even 2 crore. For last 2 days, the debates are going on now. Not even 2 crore. And we are talking of 57 crore workforce in India. Out of that 57 crore workforce in India, 93% are in informal economy. And informal economy, mainly they are self-employed, piece rate workers, then those in agrarian sector, and those with MSMEs. They are the large workforce, rural and in urban area. We were looking forward that there should be urban employment guarantee scheme like rural employment guarantee scheme. But even Manrega has been ignored, as told by the previous speakers. The issue of wages is a serious issue for us. And this minimum wages issue is not addressed. And the economic survey, as mentioned by others, has already shown that the minimum wages in real sense have sunk down. And the statistics which Sandeep was telling here, if you look at that statistic and then add on to inflation, what has happened in these years from 2017-18 to 2025, now we are in. So even that what economic survey is saying is much more worse than what economic survey is saying. So who are these people? These are the working masses. These are the workers who are in a difficult situation, who wanted to look at the budget which should address them. But the budget became only for the purpose of winning some elections. So budget after budget, whole intention is how to garner votes. Intention is not to handle the economy. And India, such a big country, is going to suffer with so many of its millions of people, billions of people who are living on meager wages and meager earnings. The livelihoods are absent. So we wanted employment to be addressed, but employment is not addressed in this. Talking of indirect employment, what is our experience? They declared ELI, they declared production-linked incentives and all trying to say that this will generate employment. It is only incentivizing the employers. And Mrs. Sitaraman used ease of doing business several times. This term was used. And that's where we, the working class, know what do they mean by that. And in the name of ease of doing business, you are giving Gati Shakti to private sector and you are killing your own public sector. Now they have brought 100% FDI in insurance sector. It's not only the employees who are supposed to suffer, no. It's the people who are going to suffer. Those who are benefiting from the insurance companies, the public sector companies, in various services which they get, and the life insurance, which is really a lifeline for many of crores of our people who get involved into it. And the money in this public sector is always handy for the government to run its own social schemes. All these social schemes are done through banks and through insurance sector. The banks are under attack, and now 100% FDI in insurance also. That's what they are going to do. The scheme workers are almost 1 crore. ICDS, Anganwadi, ICDS, Asha workers, midday meal workers, they are not less than 1 crore. They are not even worker status with them. And so they are devoid of anything. So they are given honorarium only. So nothing has been done as far as they are concerned in this budget. Similarly, talking of agriculture, it was said this budget is to concentrate on agriculture, it is to concentrate on MSMEs, it is for investments, it is for exports. These 4 things she repeated when she said the country is not just its soil and a country is its people. But what have they done to the agrarian sector? Agrarian economy is not addressed. Farmers' distress continues. So how Viksit Bharat will come off? Vast majority of rural area is till today 40% families living depends on the agrarian sector even till today. Now, in such a situation, what is the lip service done to the agrarian sector. I need not go into detail. Others have spoken about it. Now, the migration issue. A whole country saw what happened to the migrant workers. And I want to tell you that within the state, migration is maximum. And then migration intrastate. So intrastate migration within the state, out of total migrant population, which is almost 40 crore in the informal economy. Out of them, 80% are within the state and 20% are outside the states, going and coming back. We had demanded policy on migration during Corona period, and the government promised that they will bring a policy on migration to deal with the migration within the country and to deal with the migration internationally. Our workers suffer everywhere, and now and then we keep listening to the news what happens to them. And the Indian government or our embassies, they don't even are sympathetic to the problems when they face very severe situations. And the families run pillar to post, and then they contact the trade unions also. The government said they will bring in policy, but instead of that, they have amalgamated Migrant Act into Occupational Safety Health Code, OSH code. And what they have done is, out of all the articles and the clauses of that Migrant Act, the Interstate Migrant Act of 1979, which was not implemented by respective governments, and our migrant workers suffered during Corona period. They have taken only 6 clauses which go against unions and against migrant workers, goes in favor of employers. So those 6 clauses are dumped into Occupational Safety Health Code, and Migrant Act itself is being abandoned, and immigration issue not being taken care of. So vast majority of our informal economy worker is among the migrant workers, and that sector is not addressed at all. They talk of MSME, which is the maximum job giver. MSMEs, you are only increasing how much more credit they can take, but you are not giving them relief on GST. And this is the sector which suffered most during demonetization and during GST. Unplanned things being done in this country, and all with keeping an eye on votes only, not keeping an eye on the economy of this country, how to handle it. So in that also, we have been demanding there has to be a policy. We are saying these labor codes are in the name of ease of doing business. They are anti-workers. Workers were never consulted. Indian Labour Conference was never held, and you want to impose it even without talking to those who are the stakeholders, the major stakeholders. We didn't say that employers should not be consulted. Employers and employees together in Indian Labour Conference along with the government are supposed to sit together for any changes in labor laws. So you bring labor laws forcibly and impose on it, and then you think that we should hum dugdugi bajaye ki aapne bahut acha budget de diya. It's not so. It is not true. It is anti-workers budget, I should say it in a straight away manner. So MSMEs have been shabbily treated, and the corporates will further gain out of this kind of a budget. And these indirect linked schemes will not generate jobs. Already, if you look at the government's own report, what has happened to ELI, which was announced in June month, what has happened to that? How much they succeeded? They rather depressed the wages. The workers who were earning 40,000, 45,000, you are incentivize them, the employers to give them only 15,000 rupees. All those schemes are actually failing. So these kind of indirect job creation cannot work in this country. So I go by the panelists who are saying that the budget has overlooked all these things, and all social sector spending is actually in real term reduced. You look at education budget, you look at health budget, you look at sanitation budget, you look at water budget, clean drinking water, or you look at poor housing budget. As much budget was given, 50%, 60% or 40% was spent, and now this time all that money was still there lying. And this time you are giving sanction of the budget even less than what was announced last time, or what was even spent in some cases. So social sector spending has been shabbily treated in this budget also. So looking at those whole things, also, as I told you about labor codes, I also want to say, she said we have decriminalized 180 laws. We know what the decriminalization means. You have stopped inspection, and our workers are dying everywhere. In occupational safety health situations, every day there is a news of workers dying. The whatever the safety is in place is not in the place. It is there on the papers. And then at that situation, the government is not at all worried about the safety of our workers, and inspection system has been abandoned, and inspection system will be finally done away with. Strikes will be done away with. The negotiations, all our systems of moving for getting collective bargaining benefits, all that will be doomed, because they are winding up the labor codes. They are talking about tribunals. They will stop the whole system of negotiations the way the trade unions have been doing. So decriminalization is actually in the sense how to gag the trade unions. So from the working class point of view, we think the budget has done a lots of damage to Indian economy as such, because vast majority of population, the labor force, their families, if you include it, it's more than 100 crore. If you add into farmers and the agriculture workers, they are saying we are to agriculture sector, they say हम उनको आत्मनिर्भर बना रहे हैं. कहां से आप आत्मनिर्भर बना रहे हैं? रूरल इंडिया तो अभी भी तरस रहा है, क्राइसिस में है, डिफिकल्टी में है. What has been given by this budget to them? It's not there. So I think with these things, I would like to stop here now, so that if there is a second round, I will be able to come. But definitely, this budget has really failed in meeting the expectations of common masses, and the budget is totally eyed on 5th February polls, as well as looking at a whole hype is being created, and then looking at Bihar. It is a double-edged budget. You have Biharis in Delhi who are voters, and you have a partner in your NDA government in Bihar, which you think will trouble you. So you want to handle these two things, and you bring this budget in this manner. So we are really thoroughly disappointed and in anguish. On 5th February, we are going to have All India protest. And now yesterday in the meeting of Kisan Morcha, they are also going to burn the copies of budget. We are going to have All India protest on this budget, on all the issues, some of the issues which I mentioned, some the other speakers had already mentioned. So we are going to do on that. And we will definitely be intensifying our struggles, because budget debates will continue. And we would want pro-worker member parliaments of various political parties to take up their cause.
Thank you very much for your passionate presentation. Of course, as an activist, it must be paining you to see the way the labor market outcomes are coming out, and it's only right that you feel so passionate about it. Although right now we are at the budget, and so the labor codes and the rest of the policies are the matter of discussion for probably a wider platform than this. This budget, as far as I can see, in terms of from the point of view of labor, I can see only some efforts for skilling, and the other thing is about the gig workers and who can now register on the Interim portals and avail of health assurance and so on. Now, of course, Interim has been there for some time, ever since COVID, And one doesn't know, at least I don't know, how many have got insurance benefits coming out of that. Maybe that will be a matter of another independent study. So thank you very much, Madam Amarjit Kaur, for enlightening us on various challenges that are facing the working class. And of course, Irudaya Rajan also, sir, also said that, people are going back to agriculture, and that actually means distress, and it doesn't mean that they are, innovating as farmers and so on. This is also a point which is brought out by Santosh Mehrotra, sir, that, people are falling back to, let's say, unincorporated factory sector, unregistered units, and these units are increasing, but this only means that unsafe and indecent working conditions. So thank you very, very much for this. And can we now have Madam Swarna Vepa? She would enlighten us on livelihoods and employment in agriculture and MSME sector. Professor Vepa? Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to start with a look at the macroeconomic issues in India. The perception about India is that the GDP growth has been at 6.2%, which happened to be the highest in the world. And then the inflation rate seemed to be fairly low at something like 4.7%. And the fiscal deficit is narrowing. And then, we also talk about India occupying the 4th position in the as highest with highest GDP in the world. And then everybody, including the IMF, says that we have robust fundamentals. And then we also planning to sort of become a Vishwaguru, and probably it translates into a superpower. And also we are sort of planning to sort of become a developed country by 2047. That is, just about in a 25 years period. So on the top of our population, on the top of it, the population is also growing slow. And so we have shortages of labor, so which actually should mean that the wages should go up. And there are peak season agricultural manual labor shortages. And now everything seems to be rosy. And the question is, why are we worried about it today, despite all the good things that are supposed to be happening? See, there are a couple of reasons why it is happening. The most important one is that, next slide, please. So the most important one is that we have come to a new normal where everything seems to be changing in the world. So there is a recession, and then everybody is losing jobs all over the world. And then there is also, we have a large number of other problems which are related to trade, and then acquiring technology for development. And a large number of other bad things are happening in the world for us in India. And then at the same time, in fact, we have to live with all these odd situations and still develop. So what is it that went wrong with India? It only shows that it is sort of possible to have a good, robust economic indicators on one hand, and on the other hand, it is possible to sort of have a jobless growth and distress situation. So first, the government has put hopes on CapEx, that is capital expenditure, thinking that the infrastructure development will in fact bring more growth. And if the infrastructure is supposed to bring a lot of growth, and then, it's supposed to help people to get jobs. That didn't happen. Why didn't it happen? It's because all the infrastructure projects are yield only in the long run. I mean, they're not effective in the short run. That's number one. Number two is that all these infrastructure projects, in fact, have been returning a much lower returns. That is, capital output ratio, in fact, is increasing so much that then the returns on the capital investment is much lower. So it will never give you the type of return that you want to have. And so the capital expenditure increases did not help India at all. That's one thing. And the other thing is that there are a number of problems which we are facing. One of them happened to be declining wages, which have already everybody spoke about it. And then the next important thing is about the unemployment. What is happening actually in the country is that ever since 2018-19, there has been a sort of decline and in the growth rate. The growth rate has fallen because we did not really bother about any of these problems. And then happily, the government said that, there's nothing wrong in it. So the macro situation is very good. And that's what inflation has been controlled. And so everything should be right. But then the country is having only a jobless growth. And the actual real incomes have fallen. I mean, we have already seen that. And then they refuse to recognize the distress in the informal economy. The informal economy particularly lost its capacity to absorb more labor. That is very clear in one of those statistics that I've given. There is a productivity report which has been produced in the recent years, which of course goes only up to 2018. But at the same time, by then already the absorptive capacity of the small scale sector has fallen, and then probably it must have been fallen much more now. And even if the inflation rate is supposed to be very low, continuously, if you have even an average 6.18% of compound interest when inflation over a period of time, over 6 years, about 44% of your real worth is gone. And so you have a lot of problems. And all these problems are compounded by another important aspect, that is unemployment. We are saying that the country is doing very well. Our unemployment is only 3.2% in the rural and 4.9% in the urban areas. But then we have completely misrepresented the unemployment situation by using a sort of statistics, which is not correct to use. Anywhere in the world, unemployment means if a person is without any earning whatsoever, he is considered as unemployed. But as far as India is concerned, the usual, status unemployment means that even if he works for a few days in the entire year, he's considered as employed. The long periods of unemployment of his is completely ignored. And on the other hand, a large number of people, particularly women and others also, who are working in the family, who are helping the family enterprise, are considered as workers, even though they're not earning a pie. And so the very fact that we have not looked into the data and then corrected the type of statistics that we need to correct the unemployment situation has not been done. And again, if you look at the NSS data, we also see that 85% of the rural population and 55% of the urban population get less than 6,000. And of course, everybody talked about the falling rural wages, and also urban wages have increased, but they've increased very little. So on the whole, there's a decline in the wages, actual decline, and even in nominal terms, sometimes, particularly in the rural areas. And in general, there has been a sort of a fall in the real wages. So obviously, there is a distress situation, and nothing much is happening there. And as far as the agriculture is concerned, even though there are hardly any jobs which are being created there, they're talking about some schemes and giving some freebies to transferring some money to the cultivators and others, which is not of much use for the simple reason that the cost of production of, say, for example, 1 hectare of rice is more than 1 lakh, probably goes up to even 1 lakh 20,000 to 40,000. And even for wheat, the cost of production is something like about 70,000 rupees or so. And then the amount of money that has been given per farmer is in fact is minuscule. It'll only reduce his losses and nowhere to sort of regenerate the economy and particularly the agricultural economy as such. So there's a big problem. And while we have the potential to make agriculture a driver of economic growth, nothing has been done. The investment has been coming down over a period of time. There's hardly any investment in the agricultural sector. And what all is happening is giving a few freebies. Now, this year, they're talking about giving more loans, and also they're talking about making seeds available and all that, and also talking about the aspirational districts. Exactly, aspirational district program, which in fact Nirmala Sitharaman particularly said has been successful. But then, if that had been successful, agriculture would have really prospered. If you go back to see during the heydays of agriculture, that is the 1980s, when really the Green Revolution period, when the labor absorption increased and the actual real wages went up, and then we had produced enough, and there wasn't as much distress as there is today. There was a IIDP program, that is Integrated Area Development Program, which has been put in place by Professor Swaminathan, and that really worked. And what did they do? The government has spent a lot of money on research and development, and there's a huge amount of support by way of extension workers actually going to the fields and helping the farmers. Today, the farmers depend only on the dealer who sells the seed which are produced by Cargill and, say, Monsanto, and then all the technical advice is taken from them. In such a situation, even if you distribute seeds, nothing is going to happen. And then that is, and all those programs that have been mentioned in the budget are not of much use to agriculture as such. And then the next section of population, which happened to be suffering, seemed to be the non-farm workers, and also the urban non-farm workers. And most of them are particularly in what is called the MSME sector. So when we talk about MSME sector, the first M is micro, second S is small, and the next is the medium enterprises. So the micro sector hardly has any potential to employ people, because most of them are self-employed, and most of them are, in fact, eking out a living. And then the small sector is slightly better, but not capable of really improving employment. So the only sector which has got a potential of absorbing more labor happens to be the medium enterprises. And if you look at the composition of the SMSEs, we find that about 97.7% happen to be in the small enterprises sector, which really cannot, help employment. And the second one happens to be, I won't take very long. The second one happens to be the small sector with only 1.8%, and then the medium-sized enterprises that have employment potential are only as small as 0.8%. And probably these people also have a potential to develop. So this particular slide shows from 2008 to 17, unorganized sector employment growth has been negative. And the organized sector, in fact, grew up to 2007. So something like 2000, some mid-90s to 2003 happened to be the heyday of Indian economic growth. And then the heyday of agriculture happens to be sometime in 80s. And afterwards, by 2008-17 itself, there has been a negative absorption of labor in the unorganized sector. And particularly the total manufacturing sector, which is supposed to be the backbone of India and supposed to be the driver of growth, in fact, has no absorption capacity unless the medium industries, in fact, have been given some help and to really absorb some labor. But then there is a lot of problem as far as the medium enterprises are concerned, because these medium enterprises are something which have something like 50 crores to say 100 crores, or maybe they have increased it recently. But at the same time, they have like there's a lot of opportunities are there. They cannot survive because the governance depends on in the hands of the state. So for everything, the moment you are an entrepreneur, you right from the starting from registration to acquiring land and acquiring a water connection, acquiring an electrical connection, and then getting a number for GST. All these things are, require giving huge amount of bribes. So after paying all these bribes, the cost of production goes up so high, and then the profits that these people get will be very low. And then in such situations, there's no way that the medium-sized enterprises can survive, and that's the very reason why we have what is called the missing middle. So the others are of no use.
Yeah, can we just round up, ma'am, if you don't mind?
I'm not taking very long. No, I haven't. Please, I won't take very long. I'm just.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
You want me to proceed? Do you want me to
Yeah,
proceed?
go ahead.
Shall I proceed?
Yeah. Since you're coming to the budget now, it may be useful. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
So, whatever relief that has been given to the MSMEs is not enough. And then there's just last point which I want to make. That's about the relief given to the middle classes. And the middle classes, of course, to whom the relief applies, probably constitute about 20 to 20% of the urban areas, because everybody, according to the latest NSS survey of 22-23, happened to be below that of the middle class level income and below the income tax levels as far as the rural areas are concerned. And so only in the urban areas, a few 25% of them fall into this category. But now the question is, can they be drivers of economic growth? The question is, what will they do with the additional income that they have? Most of them are also threatened with job losses. Let's not forget that. Even the middle class is threatened with the job losses, particularly with AI and the slowing down of the economy and all that. And so they may spend the money to hedge in gold and silver. They can also may buy electronics. All of them happen to be imported goods, which are not going to help the Indian economy anymore. And so we have to see where the money goes. And maybe there will be some amount of growth. We can't say no, because a part of the consumption, in fact, goes to the Indian goods. And so there may be a higher level of consumption, which may sort of increase our output and adds to the growth. It may add to the growth, there's no doubt about it, but does not mean that it will lead to the absorption of labor. It will still be a growth without jobs. So that can very much happen. And then just last point, which I want to make, is that the problem is there is a lot of potential in agriculture, and particularly to create jobs, not only in the rural areas, but also in the urban areas. But then absolutely there's no investment at all. In fact, the data clearly shows that urban doesn't mean there is no distinction between urban, rural, but the urban-rural distinction is not equivalent to agricultural, non-agricultural distinction, because a large number of semi-urban areas have got a lot of people who own land in the nearby villages. And so there is an incentive. There are people who are eager to invest, but at the same time, government has not done anything, and particularly the NREGA program has been really dumped, and that, of course, is very sad. Under these circumstances, it's rather difficult for India to become a sort of a superpower, or even to sort of provide sufficient number of jobs to the particularly the distressed sections of the population. That's in the rural sector and also in the urban sector where most of them happen to be informal workers. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation, ma'am. And of course, as long as if you're still talking about the bribes and what hurdles are created when by getting the license of opening a new concern and so on, then ease of doing business is still far cry. So if you have just reformed the labor laws in the name of ease of doing business and the rest of it remains the same, the rest of the structure remains the same as constrained as ever, then probably ease of doing business has not. I mean, of course, this budget also speaks about creating a healthy competition between the states by giving them their ranks of ease of doing business. Let's see how it unfolds. And of course, you spoke about the MSME sector and how that's a backbone, but the kind of MSME sector, the middle range MSME sector, which can actually create more jobs, are less in number. Thank you for that observation. And we will come back to you if there are more questions, of course. So Professor Parthapratim Sahu, sir, can we have you on rural skilling and employment potential and how the budget tries to address these issues?
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. And I will try to highlight very simple. I may sound like very generic, but my first point will be, if I read a budget, one budget, and try to make an assessment of its likely impact on two critical aspects, that is employment generation and livelihood, then that will be, I would say, will not be a holistic, or that will be a long drawn conclusion or a long pipe dream. So when we talk about these two critical issues, employment and livelihood, maybe we should take a longer perspective of, I would take 2-3 last budget, try to connect with this budget, and maybe then I will say that employment is increasing, employment is decreasing, or livelihood is improving and all that. And I would also like to highlight or flag up some concerns of the rural people who are on the BOP, bottom of the pyramid, and who are directly or indirectly affected by budget, but they have no clue what is budget and how they are going to be affected. So we have people that segment we have both in rural and urban area, and who are affected by this budgetary provision announcement and all that, but they have no clue how they are going to be affected. So we can take a comprehensive view of 2-3 budgets, and I read budget in such a way that what are the 2-3 things we have promised in last 2-3 budget on employment creation and on livelihood improvement? Have we leveraged something on that? Can we leverage something on that? Continue that discussion? Or something new we also want to introduce, keeping in the next 2-3 years in mind? So that is very important, because you look at any budget, in every budget you will find that this budget will boost employment creation and also improve the quality of life. Every budget. There is no budget which does not talk about employment creation in different forms and content. And we have talking about all 4 perspectives. One, the growth-led employment creation. Let's grow, it will take care of everything. But all of us have said how our growth, the employment generating capacity of the growth has been questioned. So since 1991, we have been talking about the same narrative, jobless and jobless growth rate. And a lot of capital intensive production process is happening, because of which maybe employment, the kind of employment that we are, the number of employment that we are trying to foresee, we are not getting. For me, when I say employment, I'm also more concerned about two things. One, the earning content of the employment. B, the sustainable. Because everybody, you go to rural area, people are doing something. So whether something is better than nothing or there is no alternative, Tina job kind of thing. But the budget, this budget and last through budget, 2-3 budgets and the forthcoming budget, if you will see now, government is trying to make a coherence and the budgetary provision announcement. They are trying to gel well with a bigger narrative that is called Viksit Bharat. And what kind of labor market we want to see in that Viksit Bharat in 2047, and maybe towards that, the quantity deficit and quality deficit in the labor market is both very important. And we still have distress-driven migration. Idwarajan sir talked about that. We still have labor addas. A large chunk of workforce still engaged depend on informal labor market. Real wage rate is almost look like a flat. Universal social security is still a long due. So all these concerns are there. And I cannot expect everything to be, one cannot pack everything in one budget, but are we making significant movement in all these areas or not? That is very important. And we have done that. In every budget, you will see we are making huge investment some time back in textile, and in the recent budget on semiconductor and like that. And we are expecting that the big scale investment, both green and brown, will generate some employment opportunities. Then there is so many employment generation, direct employment generation program like MGNREGA. And of late, what we are talking very much, both at the center and also from the state, is that is startup and entrepreneurship. So we have large number of schemes and programs. People will not be aware that there are as many as 70 schemes and programs related to entrepreneurship development from the central government ministries. And if you will count the state government, that will go to 433. The latest one, if you can see from Andhra Pradesh, one family, one entrepreneur. So they want every family should create an entrepreneur, or one entrepreneur come from every family. This looks very good, ambitious. But when we talk about startup, entrepreneurship, there is no algorithm to create a good entrepreneur. You have to work very hard. It's a long-term exercise. You need an ecosystem, robust ecosystem, enabling environment and all that. Is our budget is putting disproportionate focus on creating new entrepreneur, and or is our budget is also concerned about a robust ecosystem and robust enabling environment, which will support not only the aspiring entrepreneur, but also the existing entrepreneur to put them on a scale ladder. And there is a job crisis, whether it is increased or decreased, we can debate on that. There is a crisis, both in the deficit of both quality and quantity. We can debate what is that forms and content. The second, we are also talking about skilling. So there is a big scheme-led skill development and entrepreneurship development in rural India and also in urban India, but I am focusing on rural India and people who are on the bottom of the pyramid, who are trying to look for doing something, one or the other things, and improve their livelihood and all that. And does this budget in the past two budget or the forthcoming budget care about them or not? Skilling and entrepreneurship schemes and programs are also that many, but we have to change our focus. We have to change our narrative from supply-driven to target-driven. Many of these skill programs and entrepreneurship development programs we are running after a number. But what we should try to create good quality, sustainable, which will grow in next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and also try to understand their pain points. There are small farms who are having marketing problems. There are small farms, small entrepreneurs who are having incubation support and all that. Can we provide that bouquet of support services to both existing and aspiring entrepreneurs so that over the year they will grow, and some of them may create employment opportunities? And things are happening, but still we have a long way to go because a large proportion of the enterprises are solopreneur, one man, one woman. The previous panelists also talk about that. So this budget There are silver lining also, which talks about this big manufacturing mission, some mission for different kind of cereals, then concerned about gig workers and all that. So we still have labor adda, and the labor adda, a person standing in the morning 7 a.m. doesn't bother he or she is part of e-Shram portal or not. He or she is more concerned on that particular day whether somebody like you and me will pick them up or not. So these kind of concerns are there, and employment creation will stay with us. Employment challenges will stay with us for in different form and content, and our objective function would be how to moderate these challenges, because it will be very difficult for a huge country like India. And if you look at rural area, 27% of rural population is in the age cohort of 14 to 29, and they need everything: job, vocational education, entrepreneurship, skilling, and all that, with a large variety of aspirations. So somebody was talking about that. Are we also factoring these issues, including aspiration and all that? Lakpati Diji has now come up, and the government is hoping that we can convert self-help group, some of the self-help group, into productive business entity, and this business will further grow and create employment opportunity in rural area. And in this budget, the budget allocation has also been increased significantly under this day NRLM, but we still have to wait and see how this budget outlay will be converted into outcome, how all these announcement proposals will be actually executed on the ground and all that. And last point I will make is that, are we making a transformational engagement with these two important aspects, that is employment and livelihood? Because when I say transformative engagement, I highlight three things. One is relevance, second is scale, and third is sustainable. So what kind of jobs, employment opportunities, or livelihood people are aspiring for, people are looking for, and what kind of schemes, programs we are propagating, we are advocating through this budget or otherwise. Second, what is the power of that employment opportunity or the entrepreneurship opportunity? Is it enough for a family? Is it enough for 2-3 other family who are directly, indirectly associated with it? And the most important thing is sustainability. So this budget and next budget, whenever it's talk about employment, livelihood, it must factor in these issues. What is the power of that livelihood initiative? What is the relevance of this, and whether it is sustainable or not? Because sustainability will be the key because of all C's: climate change, COVID pandemic, and also different type of conflicts that which is going on. And maybe in near future, we may see different kind of conflicts and all that. Last point, that we need data. We are formulating so many schemes and programs related to MSME and all that. But we know the last survey which was carried out on MSME All India Census was 2056. And now we are in 2025. All the schemes, programs, we are depending on the SEC data, SECC data of 2011. And now we are in 2044. So in this kind of budget, let's also allocate some budget to collect good evidences, good quality, for better assessment. And that will help to formulate even better schemes and programs, and also execute them, implement them even more effectively. Let me stop here. I will come again when there will be Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for you covered so many valid points. Number one, that there are just too many schemes, perhaps, and I was just wondering whether they crowd each other out. The number of schemes at the central level and the state level, and whether they actually play out on the ground, and whether they are just too many multiple schemes and therefore they overlap and they crowd each other out. That would be another question to See, it was important to know that I mean, of course, realize once again that for NACA workers or ADDA workers, Ishram portal probably has no immediate relevance. And the last point that you made, asking the right questions. Answers can be found only if you ask. Right answers can be found, or at least the search for right answers will begin only when you ask right questions, like whatever scheme you're coming, is it relevant? Can it be scalable? And will it be sustainable? And finally, I must really congratulate you for a very important point. There should be a budget for data. You know, if you're eventually playing with numbers, the ground level numbers should be authentic. And thank you very much for your presentation, sir. Much to gain from there. And so can we have Shri Uday Mishra focusing on skilling and employment, especially since we are talking about some 500 crores set aside for a center in to skill people in AI and new technology. How are we expected to move forward with the help coming from the budgetary policy in this area? So, Shivdev Mishra.
Thank you, ma'am. How much time would I have? 5-7 minutes? How much?
Sure.
Yeah, I'll set it up that way. Yeah, I'll first of all thank you for the opportunity, and fantastic to listen to all the previous speakers on this issue of skilling and the threat or the challenge or opportunity of AI. Just wanted to briefly talk about what the economic survey said, because that was very important on skills. That, you know, it said that India is not only the world's most populous country, it's one of the youngest country. 26% of our population is between 10 to 24 years of age bracket. And it said that India's economic success depends on integrating its growing workforce into productive and meaningful jobs. So this is a very important thing to understand, that, you know, it's not just about business as usual. You'll have to figure out ways to integrate your workforce. But if you look at the data, 60% of India's workforce is in agriculture. Now, that should give pause. This is coming from the economic survey. That should give pause to everybody. And if you look at real wages, then they are, for both salaried people and for self-employed people, they are below 2017, 2018 numbers. So all the talk about how many jobs are there, what is the unemployment rate, everything, what is the skill level, it all gets captured eventually in what's happening to your wages. If real wages are below 2017-18 numbers, both for salaried and self-employed, then it tells you something quite substantial about what's happening to your people. And what is the skill level and ability that they have. Now, PLFS data, again, I'm telling from economic survey, PLFS data shows that more than 88% of India's workforce is involved in low competency occupation. So everybody, it's not as if any of this is unknown, the level of requirement for skills that we have. And I'll come to the budget because this sets the context. In the skills mismatch, the economic survey says that 53% of the graduates and 36% of the postgraduates are underemployed in roles that are not matching their educational qualification. So that's the economic survey that set the stage, both in wages and competence and everything. Now, in the budget, if you look at it, skills has been mentioned many times. I counted 9 times it has been mentioned. But it's like a spray of using the word skill or skilling in different contexts. Viksit Bharat para 5 says Viksit Bharat encompasses 100% skilled labor with meaningful employment. Para 11, skilling for rural prosperity. Para 32, new scheme will be launched for the first time. For the first time entrepreneurs, skilling will be provided. So this scheme will be launched later. Para 35, it was mentioned with respect to National Action Plan for Toys. Para 36, with respect to food processing. Para 44, National Center of Excellence for Skilling. No mention of the budget there. Para 65, skilling with respect to shipbuilding clusters. Para 76, skill development for institutes of hospitality management. Para 90, global supply chains. It was said that our youth, in that context, it was said that the finance minister said that our youth has both skills and talent in reference to global supply chain. And for artificial intelligence, there was a reference in para 46 where it said that there'll be a new center for excellence in AI. And 500 crores was allocated. Now, I'll come to the allocations now. The 500 crores for the Center on AI for Education, 500 crores translates to $58 million. So you have to understand that AI is a global thing. It's a threat or opportunity at a global scale. You have companies in US investing billions of dollars. There's a between million and billion, there's a factor of 1,000. So obviously we are maybe not as rich a country, but you have to understand about what our priorities are if the center of excellence is for 500 crores, which is 58 million. Let me just come to the priority bit, because in this budget, the main story is that we have, the government has given 1 lakh crores to taxpayers as money to spend. So 1 lakh crore is a good number to have for context. How much do we spend on skill development? Right? Sorry, my 5 minutes are roughly over. If you allow me 2 more minutes.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
How much do we spend? So I calculated since 2015-16, the budget for Ministry of Skill Development, right, has ranged between, if you calculate it as a percentage of the total expenditure that government makes, right, it has ranged from 0.03% to 0.11% in all these from 15-16 to now. For the coming year, that is the year that will come next financial year, so we don't know what will be actually spent, but they have promised a increase. They have actually doubled it from the current financial year and made it 0.12% of the total expenditure. So, and what is this number? Next year we'll be spending 6,000 crores, right? This year, current year, we have spent 3,000 crores, roughly, I'm speaking, maybe some numbers here or there. But that tells you that on the face of it, everybody understands what's the challenge of skilling, what is the challenge or threat of AI, and look at the contrast between where are we allocating our resources, right? It was 3,000 crores on skilling, a Ministry of Skill Development this year. I also calculated where does it fall in the list of the priorities of the government. So obviously one way to see the priorities is the amount of money that you've spent. 3,000 crores is frankly not much. So I calculated the subheads of the schemes, different schemes, all the schemes, all the ministry-wise subheads. So there were 123 subheads, all the different ministries, different union territories. So Puducherry will be one subhead. There were 123 subheads. Ministry of Skill Development ranks 86th in that order, right? So for a country which is the most populous, which is one of the youngest, which has a bulk of its workforce poorly trained, most of them earning less because they are not capable, all of those, you just add all those stacks, and then you say it is ranked 86 out of 123. If there were only 100 priorities, it would be ranked 70th. So that tells you something. And you have all kinds of, for some of these schemes, It's a remarkable thing. Somebody just mentioned that 70 schemes were announced for some, there are some 70 schemes. If you take all India, it'll be 400 schemes. It's just a barrage. If you try to follow a particular scheme, it will falter. It will, after 2-3 years, it will falter. And a good example is there in this year's budget. There is something called Sankalp, Skill Acquisition and Knowledge Awareness for Livelihood Promotion. Lovely acronym. It was started, I think, in FY24, just a couple of years ago. 214 crores was given. Now, in India's budget, India's GDP is 324 lakh crores. In India's budget, a scheme was started, Sankalp, 214 crores in FY24. In FY25, it was the government spent 350 crores. And in the next year, it's zero. Another scheme is Strive, Skill Strengthening for Industrial Value Enhancement. Budget in 2024, 2 years ago, was 246 crores. This current financial year, that expenditure has been revised to 5 crores. Next year, zero. So now, I'm sure all of us talked about Sankalp and Strive maybe 2 years ago, right? And then we've all forgotten, as the country has forgotten, as the budget has been removed. My point in all of this, in the little time that I had to sort of look at this issue, was that we've heard so much. I think perhaps, it's a matter of inquiry for journalists like me to just sort of look at how much money has been spent talking about skill and how much has actually been spent improving skills. Not to mention whether any of those skill programs have actually led to better improvements. Because if we have been talking about skills, and this is not just about BJP government, Congress government, all the way going back to, the first time we must have started talking about skills and Skill Development Council, this, that, and all the industry veterans being heading them. How is it that our real wages of salaried people, self-employed people, are below 2017-18 levels? Forget everything. I don't care. Okay, you tell me that only 5 people out of 10 are employed, but are those 5 people earning more? They're not. So they are obviously they're not skilled. They are not meeting the demands of the market. Both sides, India doesn't just have an employment problem, we also have an employability problem. If instead of a worker, I became a job giver, right? Became an entrepreneur, I'll also have a problem of people being unemployable. I can meet them and get. So, I mean, it's a massive problem. And frankly, it doesn't merit any serious discussion if you spend this amount of money. If you spend 3,000 crores, right? In one of the financial years, not too long back, I calculated in 2022-23, so that's like 3 years ago, the total money spent by Ministry of Skill Development was 1,371 crores. Now, we are living in a world where this is the essential thing, and the doors are closing. We also talk about international migration and everything, but most countries are closing their doors. They would rather you stay in Bangalore and do some online thing. They don't want to see necessarily a brown person on their white streets. So frankly, xenophobia is very much there, and more of it will come. Not to mention the trade wars that are already on the way. So that may further put down chances of, even if you're terribly skilled, your product may not still sell because somebody's closed the door. On top of that, you have AI, which is where China is actually surprising US, right? With lower quality chips and less money, and with US actually targeting them on AI. I mean, it is just mind-boggling to imagine that we would spend 3,000 crores on skill development when our real wages are low, at a sort of a decadal kind of a low. unemployment, I mean, we are happy with our employment numbers. Everybody keeps repeating all employment metrics are good. India's employment metrics have improved primarily because women have joined the workforce, because out of distress, they are doing stuff which ordinarily we would not want anybody to do, right? They don't earn that money. It's a distress kind of a job profile that India has increasingly. And so frankly, I don't know. I mean, it is so remarkably stark, the whole situation, that you know the numbers per se do not merit very serious discussion. Well, you can have a larger discussion anyway. So that's my, sorry, I'm perhaps taking double the time. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. In with all your busy schedule, you came and gave us a very clear picture of what we aspire for and how much attention, in this case, money and allocation. Allocation is actually nation's attention or policymakers' attention on that particular field. So if we are aspiring for it and painting a very different picture of how we are going to move ahead with education, with health, and with training, and with skill development, and so on. But we are spending, all the important sectors that we mentioned in the beginning, that Honorable Finance Minister mentions, like MSME or agriculture or education, health, and so on. None of them have more than 3% of allocation. None of them have more than 3% allocation. It would range from 1.9 to 2.5. Education is 2.5, and so on. So, it's something to notice. And in fact, what you have done right now by pointing out that Sankalp ran for 2 years and then there was no Sankalp, and so on. It actually once again corroborates what Professor Sahu has been saying, that we need to find out schemes which are relevant, which can be scalable, and finally which can be sustained. So if it is an unsustainable thing, it's like, knee-jerk approach. And it's surprising that this government, which is now there for the third term, should opt for such things, because, there's no danger and you can consistently go towards a particular path, which is what it did. We went for large capex for a very long time, thinking that it will crowd in investment. Okay, as students of economics, we had heard about crowding out. For the first time, we heard something called crowding in. So we thought that, once the social overhead capital was around, the directly productive activities would automatically start. But so we cleared the pitch and we made the nice, clear ground for private players, but nobody wanted to come. And so there might be different reasons for it. So with all these things going on, it still remains a big question as to whether, if we can't provide a decent livelihood, as you said, as some people said that, people are going back to agriculture, or people are going back to work, some kind of a survival strategy, okay, not necessarily anything productive, which is what we get to know from the report of unregistered units, okay, RSU, okay. So which says that the rate of increase in the units of unregistered, the number of units in the unregistered sector is growing, but employment is not growing so much. The rate of increase, I mean. So, of course, employment has increased in the unregistered units, which I don't know, we call it robust increase and so on. Robust increase in what kind of employment? If there are no, let's say, safety regulation, if there is no occupational safety in that, and say welders are doing welding job even without one shield, okay, and if you say, okay, he's an entrepreneur and he's self-employed and so on. So this is one big mirage. All self-employed are not entrepreneurs. All entrepreneurs may be self-employed, but all self-employed not entrepreneurs. So it's a big job to see how we can chart paths for such a massive section of humanity. With that, if there are any questions, Arjun sir, Professor Arjun, if there are any questions, can we go to questions now? Or we can have a second round of what? the panelists would like to comment on each other's presentation or maybe clarify their own point after certain questions have come up. Especially, I think we need to come back to budget. Of course, quite a few of us have given the situation in Indian economy, which is relevant, but we need to come back to the budget with complete realization that one budget cannot solve all problems. Yes, one budget cannot solve all problems, but we have to see what tiny steps, if at all, have been taken in the direction of amelioration of, say, poverty. We don't talk about poverty in this. We just say zero poverty, right? Are there any questions? Or are
Ma'am,
we
there are
running?
no active questions.
We can go for the
Okay.
second round. Yeah. Or if you want to have questions to any of the panelists.
Yeah. So, any questions that? Professor Sahu sir, how did the Vishwakarma scheme run? For example, how did the Vishwakarma scheme run? If you have any idea about that. Because we don't speak about it much after once it. And last year, I think there was a lot of emphasis on cooperatives, and much hope was pinned on if we move through cooperatives, then a lot of problems will be solved. And all of a sudden, this budget doesn't mention any of that. So, if anyone would like to come up and
PM Vishwakarma, it has been started, and still I would say that we have to wait for some time more to get a better assessment, because after it was announced, they created a portal. On the portal, you have to register, and the people who wants to get benefit from that kind of PM Vishwakarma are not aware about where is that portal. They do not have internet. They may have internet, but they do not have the skill set to get benefit from it. So I think we should wait for that. And 18 trades have now been identified, but we have so many trades. Go to any rural area, you will find some unique handicraft and all that who are eligible for this PM Vishwakarma type, something like that. But still, something of that sort has come for that kind of people, and we took a long time to do that, but now that we have started, but at this point, I would say we have to wait for some time more to see whether it is making any significant dent or significant impact in the life and livelihood or not.
Thank you for that. And do we have then some kind of a public relations department to go to the grassroots level and create an awareness, and I'm sure at beat level or something?
Yeah. So one platform is local institutions like Gram Panchayat. And in remote area or rural area, they do not know who is the block development officer or who is the Tahsildar. What they know is who's the Gram Panchayat Sarpanch. So if we can capacitate local institutions, and if local institution will agree to work with other stakeholders like self-help group, and maybe many CSRs also now working in that same space, if you can join hands, coordinate with each other, talk to each other, then we will see very good result from small programs like this also.
Yeah. So would any one of the panelists like to make any point in the second round? Is there anything that you would like to?
May I come in?
Yeah, go ahead.
One is the statement made was that migration should be option and not necessity. This is what Finance Minister said. But the truth of the matter which India should confront is that there is a distress migration. And if we have to control it, we have to spend more money on MSMEs to grow, as well as there should be direct job creation These indirect methods and only giving benefits to employers are not going to help workforce. This one point I wanted to add. I agree with one of the panelists that schemes and schemes and schemes are there, but then there is no accountability if those schemes are really working down or not. We have seen that many of these schemes are only announced and nothing comes out. This is the experience of as far as we workers are concerned. Then this e-Shram portal was brought only with the Supreme Court's direction. But claiming that there are 29 crore registered on that, but there are no benefits coming. Only in elections we found in UP and in one more place, e-Shram was used to transfer the money just 2 days before the polling day. So then this e-Shram portal, only you have names and registration and you can count the numbers, but nothing is coming out as far as working class experience goes. Similarly, now what they are trying to do is that they are doing a Samadhan portal. Now, our workers, the poor workers, vast majority who are informal economy workers, they had some places where they could go. Now they are saying you register your complaints there. So the workers are getting it difficult to get themselves registered as BD workers, construction workers and all. Now for Samadhan portal, they taking complaint, nobody is going to listen. They go to cyber cafes to register, or they come to the trade unions that you please register us. So this we have been telling with the labor ministry and various departments that you keep both the methods, those who can do online, little bit aware and all, and those who are not at all online, they rather spend money from their pocket to go to cyber cafes. So this should be this physical method, accessibility, the institutions, the offices should be accessible. But to our dismay, the accessibility is rather being shrunk, and that will be more damaging for the workforce. Another point which I want to add, there were sanction posts about 60 lakh in the central and state government employees. And if you do not fill up those posts for 2 or 3 years, then the sanction post lapses. And what has happened all these years, those posts are not filled, outsourcing, contractorization, casualization happened. And the result is today only 13-14 lakh sanction posts remain, because others are not filled up. These whatever is remain in this budget also, there is nothing of the sort or any promise that our young will have some better job situation. So that is also happening. Sanction post is not getting. Ultimately, it is jobless growth and job losses. Both things are happening. So this budget will once again perpetuate this trend as far as this is concerned. And wage loss will not stop. And with one of the presenter panelists definitely told the kind of dangers which we are witnessing if the issue of 100% tariff on countries, and if those kinds of things which Trump is talking, if we find it further difficult, then we are going to be in a much bigger problem than we are. So there is no continuity, as just now it was being told that you announce something and next year you find it is not there. This was being told by the last panelist. And that is true. Nothing remains there, and that goes. So there is no continuity. So you announce 100 smart cities, and then you next budget you don't even talk about. Now you are talking about aspirational 100 districts, and then you will not be talking about. You talked about 1 lakh crore to be spent on infrastructure, then you stop telling what did you do on that. So this goes on and goes on. I think budget exercise is made into gimmicks. Railway budget was merged with it. Now nobody knows the safety of the railways, how much is being spent. We got to know only 3% budget was spent on taking care of tracks and all, the signalings and all, out of the total announced budget. And now the government doesn't even talk about it. And safety is a serious issue for common man also, those who travel through trains. So I wanted to add these things, and I am very sure that the working class, which is vast majority in the informal economy, which actually needs capital intensive industry, instead of that labor intensive industry to rise more. I'm not saying there won't be capital intensive industrialization. It will happen, but you want to concentrate on labor oriented policies, then you have to have labor intensive industry, and that is where major attention has to be paid to the MSMEs. I am very well aware that out of these units, vast majority are out of labor laws, because they keep their number of workers less than the threshold which is announced. And now these labor laws are further going to raise threshold from 100 to 300. So this difficulty the workers are facing, that very next day you reach there, you can be told, nahi, tumhara aaj zarurat nahi hai. You may go. So even those who are salaried workers who come in the category of registered units, even they are going to face more and more problems. And this trend of having outsourced works, all big institutions, the government departments, everywhere, most of the work has been outsourced, which is called as, you see, less paying jobs. Class C, Class D is mostly outsourced already in universities, in institutions, in courts, everywhere, in hospitals. So there is no hope at present. I should say this budget doesn't give us hope. And next time, in the next budget, we won't be hearing some of these terms which were used in this budget. We will be hearing something else. So the budget is not eyeing on how India progressively, so that in every budget you tell what we achieved through last budget, and then you say now we are moving in this direction. Our experience was not good here, we are changing this course. So that needs to be told. That is not being done. So for last 10 years, it is only every time some new statements and then camouflaging around it, and a lots of publicity. And presently the publicity is going on. When we were asking for 8th pay commission, government said we will not give you. And as soon as the elections have come, they have announced 8th pay commission. We do not know what will be the conditions of that pay commission. And we were saying that middle class should get some leverage on income tax paying thing. And now suddenly they have come out with this thing. And we know the actual thing is not what they are announcing. The real thing is that people were already almost out of 9 crore, 7 crore were already benefiting, not paying income tax out of these 9 crore income taxpayers. So only 2 crore are going to benefit among the middle classes. But vast majority, as one of the panelists said, income tax लगाएंगे, लेकिन income होना चाहिए ना पहले. If there is no income, where is the income tax? This one of the panelists said, which is very true. So we are not hopeful as far as this budget is concerned. We think the distress will continue, agrarian crisis will also continue, and the workers' tragedy will also continue.
Yeah, thank you for your observations. I hope situation may not be that grim in reality. We all live on hope. Okay, उम्मीद पे दुनिया कायम है, right? So it's an important observation that the other day, yesterday, I was in another session regarding budget discussion in Mumbai, and so one common thing that came out was, for example, how much of the observations or the recommendations mentioned in the economic survey get translated into budget, and whatever is allocated and announced in the budget, how much of that really comes on the ground? And as you said, ma'am, how much of that gets achieved and how much, therefore, we need to rework. And in case those goals were not relevant anymore, and therefore, if you're going to shift our trajectory, any explanation for that? So this is a basic accountability, because it's all everybody's money, right? So, for example, if you look at, let's say, the data produced by DIPP, Director of Industrial Promotion, Production and Promotion, you find that the PLI scheme, which was announced for 14 sectors, all the targets regarding investment, employment, and income generation, or rather output, sales, okay? Investment, sales, and employment. None of these targets are met in any of those 14 sectors. So what I did was, it's very difficult to actually reproduce the entire 14 sectors in all these 3 parameters. But if you just look at the aggregate level of employment, there is about 500 times gap between what was expected to happen and what has actually happened. So something like 1 lakh million people have actually got jobs, whereas the projection was 59 lakh. So that's a gap we have. And what we have done after that is that we have only added more industries in PLI scheme. So there's something lacking in probably introspection and the clarity of ideas, and which is why there is the jumping from one scheme to another scheme, and probably just the desire for projection rather than actual action on the ground. But yeah, so any other comments? Yeah.
Suchita ji, just I want to add here that as many, one is you gave the comparison on PLI, how much it was supposed to be, and 500 times it was different. Another is how many jobs are lost and how many jobs are actually created. So there is also a very big big gap, and this is never informed how many. Like in AI, so many jobs will be lost and some will be created. That gap will be there, which is not informed to us. Another point about gig, they are talking very big. Gig will be covered, gig workers and all. Truth of the matter is that they are not ready to discuss about employer-employee relationship at all. This whole thing, this scheme will not come on board. They are saying they will be covered in social security and all. Our experience of other workers being told that they will be covered in social security, it never happened. So about them, until and unless you pin down that you accept that they are a worker, they say they are a business partner, somebody says something else. So first make them visible that they are workers doing some work. Until and unless you do that, all your schemes will again fall down. And many of those who join this app based work, barring those who are in Uber or Ola, even they are shifting the work. Others are having it a stopgap arrangement for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. Those boys and girls are searching for better avenues than this gig work, which doesn't have any fixed working hours. You don't know what time they will be working and how many times they will be working, how much incentive they will get, and out of that incentive also they are rushing and meeting with accidents, because if their time they take less, then the incentive is okay, otherwise the money is cut down. So lot is being talked, gig. Government is claiming as if they are doing a very big thing. Rather, we are worried that social security funds of our EPF, of our various construction workers or the BD workers or the mineral board, government has eye on taking those funds and pushing at one place. They have an eye on EPF funds. So for us, when they say 80,000 crores are lying with the ESI, so then we suddenly worry what is going to happen, or so much money lying with the construction welfare board. So these things
Yes.
are there. Government is eating into the money which is there for workers, which is very, very bad.
Yes. Professor Acharya, would you like to come in and add any comment or any remarks on the things that you said and probably the things that you didn't say?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. The one thing I wanted to say is that budget is a statement of fiscal policy. And we've been talking about a long-term fiscal policy for what, 25 years now, maybe more. But we've never had a long-term fiscal policy. In each budget is a unique statement which expires at the end of the year. And as Raj Krishna, an economist of yesteryears, he used to say, in Hindi, he used to say, मंदिर में यदि कोई मूर्ति आ जाती है तो वो दोबारा हटती नहीं है. It's the same thing. If you start a program, it never closes. We did a recent study for the ILO where we found out there are as many as about 208 social welfare programs, out of which virtually 200 are never known. Jyoti Bhai Phule, this Bhim Bhanu program, etc., between the states and the centers. Some of them have zero allocation for years, but the programs have not shut down. 1 or 2 persons are clerks working there. So unless we have a long-term fiscal policy, a budget stays limited to that particular year, will have limited impact. The other thing is, the only other thing I would say, is that to expect a budget to be a 5-year plan, it doesn't work that way. It has to have synchronization with India's long-term development policies. And since 5-year plans have been given up, we don't have a long-term development policy, except Viksit Bharat. Viksit Bharat is what? Today we're talking about electronics because Chinese have made deep sea. Yesterday, we were a few years back, we were talking about superconductivity because somebody else had developed that. Do we have an electronics policy in this country other than being a backroom boy for the United States companies? None. We are talking about $250 billion of software. But, I mean, do we have a single product? One product? No. So, unless it makes sense for that specific period, for very specific government-run programs, period, it doesn't have, it's not a development proposition unless we have a link of a long-term with a long-term fiscal policy and other development policies. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's of course very valid. Budget lasts for a year, but its vision may continue, and unless and until there is a consistent follow-up of what we said in the recent past, at least, if not distant past. But at the same time, there's a great what do you call panache, if you want, to talk about what will happen, Amrut Kal, and next 25 years, and that somehow catches the imagination of people. And I must say, budget in fact is a tool in the political economy. So you can't remove the need for populism in the budget. Of course, at a rational level, you would like to criticize it, but eventually, populism will always remain an inseparable part of any budget. It only depends on how astute the politicians are and how confident they are that they are going to survive any tide and they will still remain in power, and therefore they need not fear even if they make some unpopular decisions. In fact, I must say, this government, when it was, immediately after the pandemic, they took many unpopular decisions. Actually, they did not distribute money, and which is what they started doing just before the elections. And as Madam Kaur pointed out, that it's catering more and more to elections now. Anyone else, Mr. Chachra or Mr. Professor Rajan? Would you like to make any comments, or Professor Arjun, is it time to kind of wrap up? In the meantime, anyone else wants to add, or is there any questions on each other's presentation, any doubts on each other's area of presentation? Professor Vippa, would you like to add anything that you have said, or comment on what others have said?
No, I think most of the issues are covered, and more or less everybody has expressed the concerns.
Yeah. So, Professor Arjun, is it time to wrap up?
Ma'am, we can have your closing remarks, then we can conclude, or any way forward remarks from any of the panelists?
Right. So, of course, India is an aspirational country, and a lot of effort has been done to continuously keep that aspirational level, the dopamine, as you can call it, at a very high level under various slogans or various schemes and so on. The Vikasit Bharat being the biggest mega dream project that we talk about. But of course, many economists have time and again, including the international organizations like World Bank and so on, have said that the emerging markets are least likely to cross the middle income range in the given circumstances in the next decade at least, or more to come, because the conditions in the global economy are not too suitable. So all these uncertainties arising out of war, the climate, the rage of the climate, And the food inflation, in fact, which is partly because of the heat waves and agricultural production suddenly going down, either because of the heat waves and the floods and so on. So, all these things taken together, the source of uncertainty, of course, is now very clear after the recent elections in the US. So, what happens if everybody wants to simply protect their own ground, and are we going to then reach the target of exports? And of course, in this budget, we have also done a couple of things which don't go in line with bringing more equality. Of course, the budget doesn't talk about the income inequality and the unequal distribution of wealth on any page. We only talk about zero poverty. But there are concessions. The import duties on expensive vehicles has been cut down. The bikes, which are expensive bike, like 40 lakh worth price, 40 lakhs plus, they are being cut down. So there is also another undercurrent of where the budget is going, to whom it is catering to, and what might therefore happen to the livelihoods of so many whose aspirations, of course, have been whipped up before elections and immediately after elections and under various projects and so on. But when they go on the ground, they may not find a livelihood that they can live with pride as citizens of our country. Of course, hope is something that we all live on, and we have had startups which are like we have got a large number of unicorns and so on. But even there, the situation is not completely stable. Uncertainty is actually the hallmark of the startups, and so on every ground we are pushing our effort on, but to sustain it and to scale it and keep our attention on if you're talking about one particular sector growing, how much allocation are we giving? Is there any mismatch between that? And if we have put in some money and if it has not been utilized, as for example, the CAG report of 2022 said that the funds that were allocated to the states for infrastructure improvement and other development projects, the 22 major states in India did not use about 33% of the resources. So it was not true only of the private sector that it did not come up with investment projects. It was also true of the government itself. So what was lacking? Did we really miss out on not giving enough cash during, say, pandemic? What exactly is going wrong? So, there is an input and there's some output and there's some process where there's, probably we lack attention on that process. As Professor Sahu pointed out, that there are just numerous schemes and eating up into probably each other's, area, and not much comes out of it. Hopefully, at some point, reason will prevail and we will find some way out. But it doesn't look like Vikasit Bharat is a likely realizable dream as of now, at least till the world settles down in terms of wars and in terms of tariff wars and physical wars, I mean. Okay, so with that note, let's hope next year we meet again with on a slightly more optimistic note, if possible. With that, I thank Professor Arjun for giving us this opportunity of coming together and sharing ideas. We are all concerned about India. We are all concerned about the way things are moving, and we all desire a better India, a better, more peaceful and more productive and a more prosperous India. With that, thank you once again.
Thank you, ma'am. I now would like to proceed with a formal vote of thanks. Yeah. So as we come to the end of today's discussion, I, Purvi Narayan, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks. On behalf of IMPRI Center for Work and Welfare, CWW, I would like to thank all of you for attending today's deliberation, a panel discussion on employment, livelihoods, and Union Budget 2025-26. We are grateful to our chair for the session, Professor Suchita Krishnaprasad, our esteemed panelist, Mr. Sandeep Chachra, Professor Sarthi Acharya, Professor S. Irudaya Rajan, Professor Suharna Vepa, Mr. Udit Mishra, Dr. Parth Pratim Sahu, and Ms. Amarjit Kaur for taking part in the discussion and enlightening us. We thank all our participants who have raised questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. We are thankful if you are watching us later on YouTube channel or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We look forward to welcoming you for our next budget deliberation today at 6:30 p.m. for education, S&T, R&D, and the Union Budget 2025-26. You may also find more thematic events and book discussions under IMPRI Web Policy Talk series. We hope you continue to join in future to IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you a good evening. Thank you.